Welcome. Very pleased to welcome you to Investing in Your People's Mental Health and Safety. My name's Margot Smith and I'm the CEO of the RSL and Services Clubs Association. I have the absolute pleasure this morning of introducing Tracy Sutton, who's the National Workers' Compensation and Workplace Health and Safety Solutions Manager from Warren Saunders. And Warren Saunders actually is a corporate partner of the RSL and Services Clubs Association. So many of you may know John Fallon, but Tracy and her team work on a number of the WHS areas. And so this was originally going to be a session as part of our conference, but we're delighted to bring it to you today, and we'll be recording it. So for anyone who'd like to watch it back later or share it with their colleagues, because given the current climate, I think it's a particularly important topic of conversation to be looking after our people and ourselves. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Tracy. The session will go for about 30 to 40 minutes. And so pop your questions in the chat box and we'll take those after Anna speaks. So please do, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box throughout. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Margot, and thanks everyone for your time today on this really important topic. Both Michael and I, so you'll be able to see Michael on your screen as well. Michael and I look after the division here at Warren Saunders, the Workers' Comp division, which I'm sure all of you online are familiar with workers' compensation and probably the premiums there. However, more importantly, we are lucky enough to partner with the ever so talented Anna Feringa, who's here with us today, and she'll take us through this content. Anna, and I can say this, is the best in the business. So you're in very capable hands today. Not only is she an award-winning international speaker, trainer, and workplace mental health consultant, she's a leading expert in mental health awareness and leadership and mental health and best practice with mental health. Anna was recently recognised as a global top 10 health and safety influencer, and she has 18 years consulting experience. She supports employers like yourselves by helping them see that embracing mental health in the workplace can help prevent injury and really drive culture. And then also from Michael and I's point of view, it assists with saving money or bringing down those workers' comp premiums when those claims are either reduced, so then you're not getting the site claims, or they're managed really well. So without further ado, I will actually hand over to the amazing Anna now, who will take us through the content today. But thanks, guys, for your time and commitment here. Over to you, Anna.
Thanks, Tracy. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for that quite lengthy intro, Tracy. I almost started to blush a little bit. Look, it's a pleasure to be here. To all of those who are joining us this morning, I've had the pleasure of working with Warren Saunders for about 4 years now, and spent a lot of time with the RSL and Services Clubs, particularly in and around training your people, in and around mental health first aid. So over those 4 years, I've really gotten to understand the risks that this particular industry faces. And hopefully today's presentation will start to flick some light bulbs on and start to really help you think strategically about what mental health or good mental health practices look like for RSL and Services Clubs. Because just like any other industry, the risks are increasing, and I'll go into that as we go through where to and why we should invest in people's mental health in the workplace. So it's a real pleasure to be here, and I will kick off with my presentation. So today we're going to be talking about psychological and psychosocial safety in the workplace, primarily around direct and indirect costs, consequences, and benefits of putting workplace mental health on your strategic agenda from a plethora of areas and reasons, whether it's compliance, whether it's culture, whether it's, as Tracy referred to, reducing or preventing those mental injury claims, because we know they can be complicated, lengthy, toxic, and expensive. So let's have a look at the state of play and what is actually happening across the workplace mental health landscape, and also the benefits of investing in this particular area from a safety and a cultural perspective. So what happened between March and November of 2020, because the whole COVID-19 piece hasn't been around that long to really draw longitudinal studies out to show the long-term effects. All of those things will start to pop out in the next 3 to 5 years. But what the Brain and Mind Centre, the Black Dog Institute and Beyond Blue did between March and November of 2020, when we were in the height of COVID-19, is they ran a short study on what the impacts were across workplace mental health with a sample size of around about 10,000 people. And here's what they found. But before I show you the results, I want to let all of you know that before the pandemic hit, we were already in crisis level. I call it the double-edged sword. It took a pandemic for workplaces to actually go, wow, we're in trouble here. People really are vulnerable, and we're seeing more mental health issues and challenges in our workplaces more than ever. But before COVID hit, it was already at crisis level. We've got 1 in 5 people that have a mental health issue in a workplace at any one point in time. We had over 20% of the workforce taking time off for a mental health related injury. We also had between 1 million people with clinically diagnosed depression and 2 million with clinically diagnosed anxiety, and that's before the pandemic hit. So what has this particular piece or this particular event caused in relation to people's vulnerability in the workplace? So here we go. That study between March and November of 2020 found that over 80% of people are feeling uncertain about their future, which is an absolute direct cousin of anxiety. They found over 50% were feeling lonely. So we know that isolation and loneliness is a direct correlation with depression. Over 50% of those 10,000 people reported excessive alcohol use and reduced physical activity. Over 78% of that 10,000 sample reported a decline in their mental health. That's 78% of 10,000 people. We had over 50% feeling financially insecure. So that's always a bit of a worry for us humans as we coast through life, but even more so now that the pandemic has hit and those people are coming to your workplace to work for you every day. The pointy end of the statistics is at the moment, Lifeline is receiving more calls than ever, up to 90,000 calls monthly. That's a call every 30 seconds. And most of those calls are relating to someone that they know that is in crisis or someone that is in mental health crisis. And when I say crisis, I'm talking about people that are considering ending their lives. So the vulnerability of mental health across the entire workforce is absolutely at its peak at the moment. And because we are returning to some kind of a new normal, things are starting to open up, restrictions are starting to drop, we cannot excuse or become complacent with the knock-on effects or the lag impact of the pandemic on our staff. We're about to see a lot of future issues, and the next statistic will back that up by the Brain and Mind Centre. So the lag of this particular pandemic and the already crisis level of mental health before the pandemic hit is looking at a 25 to 50% increase in suicides across Australia in the next 5 years. We're already standing at 9 a day. So if I catch up with everyone that is attending today's webinar in 3 to 5 years' time, it's going to look more like 19 a day. And what we do is we really try and support employers that are dealing with people that are having critical events in the workplace alongside general mental health management. Critical incidents in workplaces are a huge issue, whether someone has a panic attack, a psychotic episode, or is suicidal. We're seeing the knock-on effects of that happening across a lot of workplaces. So that's just a bit of history. I wanted to create not so much fear-mongering, but I wanted to let everyone that's attending today know the sense of urgency that we're sitting in. That was a sample size of 10,000 and is reflective of what a lot of people across the industry are feeling. And because we're back at work doesn't necessarily mean everyone's going to bounce back to how they were from a mental health perspective pre-pandemic. So let's have a look. As Tracy spoke about, a lot of you are involved in the direct financial cost of when a mental injury occurs in your workplaces. And we know that they are fraught with complexity and confusion and poor management. So let's have a look at the cost comparison, because the idea after today is for each and every one of you to think about, where does mental health sit on our strategic agenda? Because not only do we want to reduce our claims, ideally we want to prevent them. We want to prevent them as a whole, and we can't do that unless we have certain measures and certain criteria in our workplaces to allow that to happen. And I'm going to run you through that today to give you an idea about what your strategic plan might look like and what you need to do next. So let's look at a primary injury claim. The average cost of a physical injury claim, so a leg, a back, an arm, is around about $10,000, and with an average lost time of about 4 weeks. That's an average lost time. We do acknowledge that there's critical physical injuries and so forth, but these are taken from an average under a study conducted by Allianz in the cost of mental health analysis. Now, let's have a look at a primary mental injury claim. So you can see the cost is over double. So it's around about $27,000 and 17 weeks time lost. So we all know that once someone goes out of the workplace, every single action that occurs after they leave will absolutely predict how quickly and how well they come back to work. Now, if there is mismanagement, whether it's from the employer end or the insurer end, or even from a primary caregiver end, we can actually see secondary mental injury claims pop up. And what they're doing is they're costing a whole lot more. And we're seeing those secondary mental injury claims become more frequent. So what a secondary mental injury claim is either a second form of mental injury as a result of a primary mental injury, or someone's hurt their arm and they've had a really bad time. They've gone through a scheme that isn't helping them, or they've experienced further stress, which has caused them to actually develop a mental health problem whilst they're trying to physically recover. So let's have a look at the cost of an average secondary psych or a secondary mental injury claim. Is around about $108,000, and you're looking at about 5.5 years time lost. So that's a high expense for your organisation. It's actually 4 times the cost of a primary mental injury claim. So what we're going to cover today is not only the pinnacle benefits of why we should invest in capability and a good mental health culture, but we want to try and reduce primarily the secondary mental injury claims. So we need to have a look at why these are happening and how we can prevent them. But once a secondary mental injury claim comes into fruition, they're pretty hard to resolve. What our main prerogative is for all of those of you that are attending today is to stop injuries happening in the first place. And we're going to show you how to do that. Or we're going to show you why you should do that. So the operational and social costs. So we've spoken about the bucks. Now we're going to talk about the operational and social costs. So if employers are not prioritizing mental health, and I'm not here to play the blame game because we don't know what we don't know. And I'm going to show you in a minute just how frivolous and confusing our responsibilities as employers are, and why a lot of people aren't in a good situation to be able to prevent these injuries and create a mentally healthy culture. But what we're seeing right now across a multitude of studies and across my experience in the workplace is if mental health is not managed as equally as physical health, this is what's happening to organizations. You are getting poor performance. You will get more conflict because when someone's unwell in the workplace, they're not easy to work alongside, whether it's a behavioral conflict, whether it's a personality conflict. You're going to get people leaving. People are going to turn over. And the thing is, the people that are in trouble are more likely going to stay, and the people that aren't in trouble are more likely going to leave because they can't tolerate working alongside this person that is not managed appropriately because there's no system in the workplace to be able to allow that to happen. You're going to get a bad reputation, particularly around younger workers. There's a lot of studies being conducted now across our millennials and younger workers, which I know that, you know, with RSL and club services, you do have a mixed cohort of staff, but a lot of your staff are quite young. And what they're looking for is more than the pay packet these days. They want to make sure they can go to work and feel safe in the process. Also, younger workers are more experienced in mental health. So they're going to come into your workplace with expectations. And if there isn't any kind of system around a policy or training or capability for leaders or anyone working in your organization to be mentally safe, that could be the determination about whether someone wants to work for you. So there's a big reputational band on the line here. You're simply going to get more claims. The non-compliance piece, I'm going to bring to you some new movements across the legal and compliance landscape in New South Wales, which I'm really excited to see because we've been swimming around a multitude of disproportionate and mixed legal obligations across several acts where I don't blame any employer for getting confused about what our obligations are. So we've got some exciting news there. You're going to have increased absenteeism, the old sickie. And we know that Australia isn't at that level now where people can ring their employer and go, look, I'm not physically sick today, but I'm just not up to coming into work today. I want you guys to stop and think and go, well, do I run an organisation where my staff would feel comfortable to say, I am not feeling mentally well enough to come to work? And I know that that's got its bits and pieces attached to it. People are like, oh gosh, we're going to have everyone calling in sick now, claiming that they've got mental health issues. Well, yeah, they should be able to do that. But there are pieces that an organisation can do to make sure that that claim is validated. So it can't just be used as a sickie, which a lot of employers are scared of. They think it's going to increase absenteeism, whereas all studies show that it's actually going to reduce it, because no one likes to be at work feeling unwell, and no one wants to be at work working alongside someone that's unwell. And you're going to get increased presenteeism. So what that means is you're going to get people coming to work, but they're going to give you about 30%. And what the dangers in and around that is that you guys service your general communities. Your communities come there for recreational purposes. They come there with their families. They come there with their mates. They come there for functions. And what you want to do is give your community a good experience in your clubs. But if you've got staff that are dropping the ball because they're not well, we need to make sure that we've got pieces in place to make sure that they get back to their best. Because they're going to make errors and they're going to make mistakes, and that's going to have a knock-on effect on your club. What they're looking at right now is the social operational costs. So all of this combined is sitting around about the $39 billion mark across Australia. All of the statistics I'm bringing to you today are from Australia. And that is looking to increase inwards and upwards of 200 billion within the next 5 to 10 years. And globally, we're heading into the trillions. So if you want to read any more about this, please refer yourself to the Productivity Commission Mental Health Inquiry of 2020 or the Cost of Ignoring Mental Health in Your Workplace paper from Deloitte in 2019. But these particular slides will be distributed to you, so you'll have all those references if you would like to do some further reading or could be convinced further. So I promised you that I would bring you a slide. This has got a lot of words on it. Don't feel overwhelmed by it because I don't expect you to read it all, but I wanted to show you where employers' obligations lie when it comes to protecting our people with mental health in the workplace. If you look at legislation, and I've got New Zealand and Australian acts in here, how would a workplace possibly know what they're supposed to do? We've got human rights acts, we've got ombudsman, we've got safe work, we've got health and safety, we've got disability, we've got employment relations, we've got privacy acts, and then each state has its own WHS act. So you can understand why an employer would sit back and go, okay, what exactly do I need to do? What is my obligation and how do I introduce best practice mental health into my organisation? So what we're really excited about is that as of May 2021, we finally got some psychosocial codes of practice. And what that means is those psychosocial codes of practice tell us what the primary risks are to people's mental health in the workplace. There's 16 of them. Now, New South Wales was the first state to go live with these codes of practice, and they went live in May 2021. So they've already been around for nearly a year. Now, I want to make clear that these codes are exactly as they state they are. They are codes. They're not essentially law yet, but what they can be used for is another piece of evidentiary information in any court case or hearing. So any one of your employers or employees rather can go to Safe Work Australia, the Fair Work Ombudsman, they can go to iCare, they can go to CIRA, They can make a complaint about what their experience is like at the workplace. And what they're going to do is they're going to send out a psychological inspector. So much like those incidents that we have around Australia from a physical perspective, where they send out an inspector and they have a look at why the incident occurred and what liability lies around the place. We have psychological or psychosocial inspectors in New South Wales and Victoria and Queensland. And the first person they're going to want to talk to is the unwell person. Then they're going to want to talk to the manager. And then they're going to want to talk to you about what measures you had to make sure that we are acting reasonably to be able to protect and support people. But also, there's an upside to that as well, is to make sure that the people that are unwell are doing what they need to do in order to recover. So we don't find ourselves in that the rat in the wheel kind of situation where you're doing everything to help someone that's unwell, but they're not doing anything to help themselves. So if you want to look at these further, all you have to do is punch into Google psychosocial codes of practice and it will come up. So there is more pressure on employers to do the right thing. But also what I like about these codes is it lets you know what risks are the primary ones and how to prevent them. They come with case studies at the back across a multitude of industries. Now, all the MPs around Australia met with Fair Work, and they've all committed to releasing these codes of practice. So WA also went live this year in February. Victoria has taken it a step further. So the OFC means out for consultation. So they've put their codes of practice out for consultation, but they're also looking to amend law, their WHS law. And generally, historically speaking, if Vic amends something in their legislation, New South Wales is very close to follow. So even though these aren't particularly law, but can be considered in court, it won't be long until those laws change. So you may as well get ahead of the game now. So those codes of practice are very live in New South Wales as we speak, and are going to be used in many, many further complaints, incidences, whether it's common law or whether it's a claim moving forward. I wanted to chuck in a case study today just to let you know what poorly managed mental health matters can do to the bottom line and to your premiums. So this is one of the biggest case studies, and I liked it because it was quite recent. So this particular matter actually happened 7 years ago, and it was heard this year. And the date of it is irrelevant. Yes, 7 years is a long time, but let's have a look at the actual event. And it wasn't a major one. Is that there was an employee that, or a manager that reported that they were overloaded with work, they were stressed and they were under-resourced. There was poor culture, and this was a council, mind you. And so because they had reported that they were under a particular level of stress, the employer had an obligation to respond. And so what they did is that they didn't respond. They just said, you'll be right, hang in there, we'll fix it, everything will be okay. So this manager continued to work, and in a really important role. I was a payroll supervisor, and you can't stuff up pays. It's a huge issue for people. So this employee also disclosed that they had a pre-existing mental health condition, both upon recruitment and at the time when they reported being stressed. Yet again, nothing else was done. The manager of this person ignored requests for further assistance and support. So being overloaded, trying to get those payroll pieces done in all accuracy, errors started to happen because this person was burning out. They were not supported. They were not heard. They were not responded to reasonably. And because this person became so unwell and so burnt out, they were stood down for a medical review. But then once they did that, there was no follow-up as far as a certificate, what their diagnosis was, or what the workplace was supposed to do with them. But yet this person came back to work. And then because this person was not receiving the help that they needed, there was no involvement with what they needed medically, errors started to happen, and because of stress and fatigue. And then as a result of that, they started to performance manage this guy. So you can understand bits and pieces about what went wrong there, but let's have a look. And this is where we start. I want you guys to start thinking about what you have in place. What could have avoided a $1.1 million payout? Firstly, if there was a clear, humanistic and applicable mental health policy and procedure. Do you have one? Because that policy and procedure lets all parties know, including the unwell person, what I need to do and what everyone's responsibilities are when I start to become unwell, whether it's work-related or not. If the manager of this person was skilled to have a mental health conversation and understood what and how to say, well, what to say to a person that is unwell, and what to set in place to make sure that this person was monitored appropriately, but also to ensure that this person that was unwell knew what they needed to do. There needed to be an appropriate psychosocial risk investigation. So this person's overloaded and stressed and under-resourced. We need to get in there and work out why. And also what happened after this person was stood down for medical review is the risk managers of that particular organisation didn't do return to work practices properly. So what does return to work training look like for your risk managers in your organisation? So you can see, if I was to break that down, there actually isn't a lot. They needed a policy and procedure, they needed some training, and they needed some proper risk management or risk investigation strategies. That's 3 pieces. Any employer can have those set up within a matter of weeks. So let's have a look at return on investment. We know that in most instances, we need to spend money to make money. Not here to argue that fact. But what we've found, particularly in the Investing to Save report by KPMG in 2018, is that for every dollar, and this is pre-pandemic, mind you, for every dollar that we spend, we're looking at about a $4.70 return. I mean, I'm going to go back a couple of slides just for a minute. If we have a look at this case study, if this particular employer had spent some funding, and I can tell you what, it's nowhere near $1.1 million, all of this could have been avoided. So we need to invest to save. So for a $4.70 return on a $1.30 investment is why we should be looking at mitigating risk and funding these particular programs in order to not only save you money, but to save your culture, to save your reputation, to reduce claims. So what we got really excited about last year, because, you know, before the pandemic, to be honest, mental health wasn't a high priority for the federal government. Now it's one of the most popular policies in our upcoming election. We've had over $156 million dedicated to mental health across Australia, but that's only because it took a pandemic to highlight just how vulnerable people are. So what Superfriend did was they released an Indicators of Thriving Workplace national report back in November 2021. So super recent, super validated. And what I always get asked in my field is, how do we compare with other people? What does our industry look like to other industries? And the thing is, no one had actually conducted that analysis until now. So if each of you go and have a look at that report, which you'll get when we release the pack, is you can actually see what high risk industries look like. And guess what? Hospitality is one of the front runners for high risk. So it's a really good thing that you're all here today. So what they found as the 4 leading causes of mental health issues in the workplace, or I have to say this, exacerbation of pre-existing issues. So I can come and work for you. I might have had depression for years. You didn't cause it. But if we don't have appropriate mental health systems in place, you are then a sitting duck to aggravate my condition, and you're liable for that one. So let me give you an example. If I've got pre-existing depression, which I'm managing, that's my bag, that's my issue, and I've come to work for you and I've told you that I've got depression, but I've got it under control, like many people do. And there is someone that has got inappropriate behavior. I can't work alongside them. They're really mean to me, or I'm getting abused by customers and I'm not getting debriefed accordingly. There's no policy and procedure. I'm going to increase my symptoms of my pre-existing condition, and you're responsible for that because you're not providing me a safe workplace. I'm sure physically, and I've seen a few of your policies when it comes to physical safety, they're bang on, but where's the mental health stuff? So what they found is that appropriate workload, so work overload is the number one cause of someone having a mental health condition in Australian workplaces. Good staff recognition comes in second. Clear change management practices comes in third, and supportive management comes in fourth. And by supportive management means we have to show our managers what to do when we are faced with poor behavior or poor performance. And primarily the best practice recommendation is to have a mental health conversation first before we start heading towards performance management and the expectations of our club. And you've signed a contract. Well, everyone can sign a contract. I can sign a contract for you and break my leg tomorrow. That means I can't work for you for the next few weeks until I recover. That doesn't mean you can dismiss me. The same thing with mental health. And that's what courts and commissions will look at is how reasonable have you responded to this person's mental injury or mental event. And you'll see the rest of it is high job control, role clarity, good work relationships, but a lot of these will emulate what's in the psychosocial codes of practice. So if you choose to invest, and I'll show you what investment looks like in a minute, this is literally just the flip side of the original. And that is you will get people performing better. You will have less conflict. You will have people working for you for longer. You'll get a better reputation. You'll become an employer of choice. Each of your clubs are community focused. So people talk about you. They talk about the club. So if someone is ill-treated or mismanaged, that's going to go around your local area like wildfire, which means that's going to impact the quality of people that come and work for you and work for your club. You will see primarily less claims, but I'm going to call something out here. You might actually get more claims. Because if we start talking, I always get this is classic fear from a lot of my clients is, I don't want to talk about this stuff because we're going to just get claims everywhere. Because people will know that they can and that they should and that they're entitled to it, and they are entitled to it. But the win here is if you get more claims because you've created a program where people know more about it and they know how to seek help and they know what their rights and entitlements are, the claims are going to be shorter and cheaper. It's the people that don't know and then put in a claim and they're so far gone is the cost of that one claim would equate to 10 general claims. So I wouldn't be too concerned if you get more claims because they'll have a better return to work rate, they'll cost less, and they'll be back at work a lot more quickly, rather than having a bunch of claims where no one comes back to work. You can't fill that seat because you're obligated to give them a job because they're in the workers' compensation system. So I wanted to just tell you that it's okay to have 10 claims that cost less than one claim that costs $1 million. Compliance. So we know we've been through the fact that compliance, the expectation for us to be compliant is getting tighter and firmer now. We've got those codes of practice. We're reviewing legislation. Victoria's already doing it. New South Wales are a breath behind. The rest of the Australian states will be releasing their codes of practice imminently, which means Fair Work Australia will then force all states to reevaluate their work health and safety regulations. You will have reduced absenteeism, which is all, as we know, particularly in hospitality, is when someone calls in sick, it can cause a whole bunch of chaos because people will want to be at work with you. And it will reduce presenteeism, which means people will be working more safely. They'll be making better decisions. They won't be dragging themselves into work feeling unwell and introducing error. And also physical safety, guys. You have a team of people that handle food and beverage and functions and maintenance. What if someone's working from heights around your club and hasn't reported their mental injury because they're too scared, because if they tell you, they don't want to lose their job, or they might be judged, because that's what people will think. That's what your staff will think like. If we don't have a validated set mental health system in our workplaces that people can see and trust and use. Otherwise, you will have people keeping their mouths closed until they get so unwell that they physically can't work anymore. And that's where you're stuck with those long-term, expensive, toxic mental injury claims, and probably a bucket load of secondary mental injury claims as well. The key is prevention. So when we're planning for psychological safety, you need to look at 3 areas. Firstly, there's your people. I'm really, really honoured to be here today, and I'm really honoured to see such high numbers, because I know that you're all either in a position of CEO or a senior leadership position or a partnership position. And that means that there's interest or visibility from the top down. If a client approaches us and they're coming from middle management, I always ask, when can I speak to the general manager or the CEO or a senior executive? Because I want to know whether this particular intervention is going to be supported from the top down. We have seen time and time again, and there's a bucket load of evidence to suggest that if executives are not engaged, your intervention will fall over. It will be a great day out, it will cost you money, and it will not make a difference. So it needs to be on your strategic agenda, and it needs to have executive oversight and support for it to be successful. We need to make our people capable, so we need to train them. So whether that looks like mental health first aid, whether that looks like mental health for managers training, whether that looks like mental health for our frontline staff, we need to be able to give them the capability to understand how to have a conversation and what to do to help themselves, and how to respond to staff that are in trouble. We need to have a look at our systems. So do you have a policy or a procedure? Do you have a procedure around critical incident management? What if someone is suicidal? What are we doing? Are we just calling the cops? Are we calling an ambulance? Because that's not resulting in really good return to work rates. It's still costing you a lot of money, and it's still not bringing people back to your workplace. We need to have a look at how we report and mitigate our risks, our psychosocial risks. A lot of systems that I look at with clients is everyone knows their lost time injury rates. They know how many people fell, tripped, or a slip, trip and fall, but how many people didn't come to work this year due to depression or anxiety or bullying and harassment or an unsupportive leader? That normally sits in an other bucket. And how can an organisation possibly mitigate future risk if it just sits in an other bucket? And there's a reason why people put it in other, is because we're scared of breaching privacy. Well, you can't keep a broken leg private. Why should we keep depression private? It is an absolute medical condition that can put that person and your other staff at risk. So we need to investigate why their condition was exacerbated, or why they developed a condition whilst working for us at our club. And our environment. So do you have safe work design? Are we overloading our people? Because we saw that work overload's the number one stressor. How many resources do you have available for your people? And what access to support services do they have? So people, environment, and systems is what a strategic agenda looks like for mental health. So I'm just going to open up the chat box now, and I would like each of you to have a think. Just, we've just been through half an hour of content, and I want each of you to think, where is my organisation? Are we one? Are we in denial? We don't have or do anything. Are we two? Are we emerging? So we might have a few cupcakes on Are You OK Day, some posters hanging around the place, and maybe some tokenistic communications. And I don't mean to sound sarcastic there, but really a communication, hey, we hope everyone is mentally well out there today, is tokenistic. People need a safety system to be able to operate safely in the workplace. And that means executive engagement. That means a policy and procedure. That means trained and skilled leaders. That means a workforce that are aware of what mental health is and how to use it. That means a robust and effective system to be able to look at risks in our workplace and how we can reduce them. Exactly if I fell over and broke my leg in your club. What happened? What did I trip over? How can we avoid this in the future? Are we three? Are we basic? We've got EAP. We've got a basic safety policy. We have some people with mental health first aid training. And it's funny because a lot of people that I work with, when they say, yes, we are an industry leading mental health employer, we've got EAP and mental health first aid, that's where I go and break some hearts, because that is very, very basic. What we do when we're starting to consider ourselves as leaders is we have, as in already number 4, a leading employer. Do you have a dedicated mental health policy? Do you have your staff trained up? Do you have some form of measurement? So how many risks did we avoid? And the reason that how you measure that is, well, how many conversations occurred? Because that's a conversation is a near miss as far as I'm concerned. But what staff are going to have conversations if they don't know how? They'll be worried about bullying or harassing, because this is a really private and personal issue, but that's still very much a workplace risk. So how do we enable or empower our people to do that? Or are you thriving? You've got a full system that we spoke about today, your people, your systems, your environment. You've got your policies, your procedures, everyone's trained up. We've got an effective measurement and risk measurement system. We're constantly reviewing it. People are aware of it. They know how to use it, and everyone knows exactly what they should do should someone become mentally unwell. So I'd like you to pop in the chat box where you think your organisation is. Just hit a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for me, just so I can have a look at where where a lot of you think you might be at the moment. And I'll give you a couple of minutes of quiet to think about this. Where is your organisation, do you think? Emerging, basic, leading, or thriving? Okay, so we've got some 2s coming in. Just giving you a couple of moments of peace, guys, just so you can really think about where you are at. Yep, a lot of 2s coming in. We've got some 3s coming in. Basic. Yep, good. Thank you for your transparency and honesty. And basic's okay. Basic's okay. Okay. So primarily 2s and 3s are coming through. So just to give you an element of comfort, that's primarily where the majority of Australian industry is either emerging or basic. And that is no one's fault, because they haven't been taught how to do it. So now that we've got some guidance and we've got, this opportunity to sit here today and answer some questions, we can start to show you how you can move from emerging and basic to leading and thriving. And it doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be a long-winded process. It's very easy to achieve, and Warren Saunders and ourselves are here to help you do that. So that's the end of my content piece today. And thank you to those that shared their information in the chat box. I'm going to hand back over to Margot now, and we will be answering some questions or comments or insights that you might have. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Anna. I think a great mix of practical case studies and also some of those more technical aspects. I think sometimes it feels a bit like we're opening a can of worms, but I think it's an important area where we need to be eyes wide open. So I really appreciate this opportunity for you to share your expertise. So far, we've had one question. Do you think people hide their mental health issues because they're frightened that they may lose their job or be bullied?
Absolutely. And we touched on this slightly in the presentation, is your people will only respond to the culture you set. So if we're not talking about mental health, if your people can't see something tangible, like a policy or a procedure or a skilled manager or a skilled colleague even to have a conversation, absolutely. I call it the 2 M's, Margot, and that is people will not speak up in workplaces because they don't want to lose their mates and they don't want to lose their money. So in translation is they don't want to be judged and they don't want to be fired. And even though there's a lot of law to protect against that, that's not going to change the way people think. So the only person that's in control of changing the way people think is the organisation itself, to be able to commit to sustainable and accessible mental health programs that people can trust and access, before the message really does sink in, that they can speak up and they'll absolutely be protected where practicable, to make sure that they get the recovery that they need, just like I would be if I strained my shoulder or cut my hand in the kitchen.
Yeah, it's a shame that there is that difference between physical injury and mental health injury. It would be wonderful if we came to a time where they were, understood in equal measure.
That's right. And in response to that, Margot, mental health really is about 20 years behind where physical safety is. I mean, we're only really starting to see the federal pressure now. So we're starting to see clear and concise codes being released. We're starting to see legislation starting to shift. And so that's where we are with mental health. So we do have a lot of catch up, but unfortunately, whilst we're playing catch up, it's costing billions of dollars, both from a direct financial perspective and from a social and operational perspective as well. And we want to be able to help people reduce that whilst the government's playing catch up.
Yeah. We've got another question here. What do you do with an employee who will not come and speak face to face? The employee only wants to text their complaint about others or work situation.
Yeah, so that can be quite tricky, because it sounds like this person has reached a stage where they're either so traumatized, or it's not always traumatized. They might just be so fed up. They might have just gone into justice mode. So look, I would probably consider mediation first. So a professional and well communicated offer to come and sit and have some mediation in a face-to-face format, to see why or how we can resolve this, because a person that is out of work is not of benefit to the workplace and is also a sitting risk. So we need to re-engage face-to-face where we can, but we can't force them, depending on this person's situation, to which I'm unaware of. I don't know if they've got a claim in or so forth. But we really do need to start talking to that person to make sure that they have the offer to sit face-to-face to hear their complaints. And once you have that face-to-face engagement, that's where things can really kick off. So consider mediation and using any other people that are supporting in that process to try and make that happen, whether it's an insurer or even the GP that might be overseeing this person, depending on what their situation is. If this person has not gone off sick and they're just not coming back into work and putting in text complaints, then that would definitely be a human resource matter where you can request that they come in to have a face-to-face meeting. But if there's mental health involved, we need to tread lightly, and that's why we need comment from the general practitioner to make sure it's safe to do so.
Sure. And so when you say mediation, do you mean from a particular body, or like what?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and there's plenty of them out there, Margot. Yeah, absolutely. So there's plenty of mediation services out there that can help. I know that your broker or your insurer might be able to direct you into the line of path, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Trace, with mediators that are familiar with what it looks like to quell workplace conflict. So there's definitely a lot of people out there that can help you appoint a mediator to try and help that. I mean, you might even have to do it more slowly. It might be a phone to phone and then face to face, but eventually this person will need to come back, but it all depends on their medical status and their medical clearance at the time, Margot.
But I love that it's recognising that, we don't have all the answers, and sometimes there are some areas that we've got our training wheels on for. And so engaging with a professional mediator is a good support to have, as well as, the team at Warren Saunders to ask any questions of.
Yeah, absolutely. And employers aren't always going to have all the answers. We don't expect employers to have all the answers. I mean, we've just seen a multitude of reasons why we don't have all the answers, because it's not a clear-cut area just yet. It's getting cleaner, but we've still got a lot of weeds to wade through yet. Yeah. So reach out to anyone that you can that is servicing you, whether it's your insurer or your broker. But just be mindful that if this person is not willing to come in, what's on the other end of the stick? Is there someone that they're scared to face? Is there someone's behaviour that has not been managed or mediated? So it depends on the matter, and it depends on the person's medical status.
Of course, of course. We've got another question. What are some simple steps for clubs to take which would take them from 3 to 5 with your rating?
Yeah, simple steps. And the thing is, it is simple. Firstly, we could definitely help you, but start thinking about what a policy and procedure would look like. Make sure that you get some guidance around, what that looks like from a legislative perspective. Make sure your people know about it. Make sure you consult with your people. Get a policy and procedure up and running. Get some training into your organisation. Get some mental health first aid happening. Get some training for managers. I just wanted to just differentiate just one point here, is that mental health first aid is excellent to have, and it won't be very long until it's a compliance requirement. But it's a community-based program, whereas if you get mental health for managers, that really digs into what a day in the life of a manager looks like when managing staff that are unwell, and what a conversation looks like, and what their boundaries are, and what their stop and start buttons are, and what the responsibilities of the unwell worker is. So, and then I would also have a look at your risk management, and having a look at how do we record risks. We'd have a look at that. What are your absenteeism rates? And then bucket it all up together. Relaunch your policy and procedure, bring some capability into your building. You will automatically, by doing that, slip into a 3 to a 4. And then over time, you'll get to a 5 once people understand how it works. Once you start to get evidence that those claims are reducing, that we're recording near misses. A near miss might be a mental health conversation, but none of that's going to happen without a policy and some training first.
Thank you. And I think it's interesting. I mean, it's tricky because workload is obviously the top issue, but from workplaces' point of view, we're seeing a staff shortage. And so it's kind of, I'm guessing, once you start to address some of these areas, others become less impactful to the business from a business point of view. So, like you said, you may take businesses, clubs may take a short-term hit if it comes to, claims might go up shortly, and you might see a little bit of absenteeism go up. But actually the presenteeism, you'll get, the productivity will go up. The culture is huge, making sure that people know, as you say, it's a safe work environment, it's an employer of choice, and that will also really have an impact on both the bottom line, whether or not it's less claims, but also productivity and culture and all those positive news stories. Absolutely,
Margot. I mean, PwC released a report. It's got a little bit of dust on it now, mind you. I think it was around about 2015-16. But, at that stage, we were sort of spending around $10.9 billion in the mental health sphere across Australian workplaces. Workers' comp only made up 147 million of that. The remaining factor out of that 10.9 billion was presenteeism and absenteeism. So claims are actually the least of our worries in a sense of cost, because even though you might have some really high premiums happening, what are you losing with people calling in sick or making mistakes or leaving and having the cost of retraining someone? So the cost of a workers' comp in comparison to the social and operational costs is quite minimal.
Yeah. And look, the second question, the second biggest issue was around staff recognition. Are we talking something as simple as a thank you, or are we talking implementing awards programs? Like what are the simple things that people can do?
Yeah, the recognition's important. And you know what, Margot, you're right. We are saying simple things like a thank you. A lot of people see reward and recognition. They're like, gosh, now we've got to pull a budget and we've got to have $100 Myer gift voucher cards, and you know what, by all means, guys, if you want to do that. But what this is talking more about the psychological or the value add of why people do what they do. So a thank you or some recognition about a task or something that someone has completed is driving up value. For those of you that are interested, the Gallup Institute have done a bunch of research around, the behavior of a leader. Their staff will mirror that up to 70%. So if leaders really start to recognize, great job here, or thank you for doing that there, or geez, you ran that function really well, or thanks for covering that person's shift, we really do appreciate it. has been reported across several studies that makes people want to come and work for you. They want to come and work for a place where they feel valued and not taken for granted. And as an ex-hospitality worker, I mean, I've pulled my years behind bars and in restaurants when I was putting myself through uni. And when you were taken for granted is pretty much around about the times that I left. So it really is important that we're looking at just that recognition. So I know technically it's stated as reward and recognition, and you guys can reward all you like, but the recognition piece, leaders really need to step up and just make sure that those simple humanistic interactions are happening, because, geez, it makes a difference on the other end.
Yeah, those conversations, those crucial conversations.
Yeah, and I think just adding to that, it does come back to the line managers or the leaders in the business that are needing to have these conversations. So whether it be around reward and recognition, or whether it be around someone coming to them to want to talk about their mental health issues or something that's gone on at home, or even something that's gone on at work, the next reaction, whatever comes out of their mouth, is the most important piece in that interaction. So I suppose that's a real key thing. Are your team leaders, are your supervisors, are your line managers capable of having that conversation? And they don't need to have the answers. They don't need to be the specialist and be able to give out the advice. It's just, how do they manage that response? Because they only get one shot at doing it. And I think it goes back to that question about the person not wanting to open up and only text, not knowing the background. Has that person tried to open a conversation with someone and they've been shut down? Like, we don't know, but there is history of that happening, because people still see it as being taboo for talking about it or having a mental health diagnosis or issue. So how do you manage that within the business is, definitely a leading way to what the outcome will be.
Yeah, and I think as leaders, probably leading by example, whether or not it's having those conversations with your team so it trickles down, showing a bit of vulnerability yourself, and, talking about, where you're at. And I think that's crucial.
It's a huge trust piece. Like Tracy, I think you nailed it. Most often you only get one shot, because if someone has decided to be firstly honest, there is that much stigma around mental health. If someone has had the decency and courage to be able to come to their leader and say, I'm not mentally well, the response from that leader will determine what's going to happen over the next several months or even years. And that's why that capability piece is important. We need to be able to train our managers on how to have an effective human care conversation, and that can be done in half a day. So it's really important, and it's saving lives and it's saving jobs. And I don't mean to sound dramatic, but it really is. I've seen it happen over years and years and years. The difference that one conversation will determine the story.
Yep.
Well, in the along the lines of recognition, I'd like to thank you, Anna. That was really insightful. I think understanding our obligations, the right thing to do, how to approach mental health in the workplace, both from a policy and procedures, training, risk strategies, those sorts of things are really, really helpful. So thank you. I might hand over to Tracy to say a few words as well, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, again, thank you all for your attendance. And again, Anna, I told you she was good, and she definitely is. But if anyone does have any questions, you're not sure where to go to next, or you're struggling with getting from those 3 to 5s, shoot us an email through. Saunders Safety and Training is the safety side of Warren Saunders, and obviously Anna works in here with us we'll be able to answer those and get back to you and point you in the right direction, and able to get you some more support in the areas that you require. But thank you for your time, and more importantly, thank you for taking the time to invest in your people in this really important topic. So.
Thank you, everyone. That wraps up this In the Know webinar, and so we'll see you next time. Please send us any follow-up questions or comments. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.